What are the keys to a happy retirement, given everything that I've said? Well, let me share with you what they are. We want to prepare our mind for retirement to make ourselves happy. And the issues we should think about are these: optimism versus pessimism. People who are optimistic do better in retirement than people who are pessimistic. People who look at the glass half full as opposed to the glass half empty. People who can find a silver lining in anything that happens to them. These people tend to do a lot better because they create the positive hormones by being optimistic. Now, optimism is something that not everybody shares, because this is also a time in our life when things start to change, and you could be pessimistic. Your work career is over, your relationships with your friends are changing, you're changing. This could drive you nuts. So before we go further, we have to get ourselves over that. You are who you are. And the fact is that at your age, you have all sorts of opportunities. Now, there are pills and creams and salves and gels that you can use, I suppose, but really, your desire to be young, your ability to be young, comes from inside, and that's where the optimism comes from. The second issue is, are you self-directed or other-directed? All right, self-directed. This is called locus of control in psychology. People who believe that they can control their own happiness, that they can make the life that they want. As my father said, if it's to be, it's up to me. They don't sit around saying, I'm so miserable, I'm so bored. Fix it, because self-directed people fix it. Interesting, because other-directed people don't. Other-directed people, nothing is ever their fault. Nothing is within their control. They sit around and wait for somebody else to come and get them. My mother, I love her dearly. She's 87 years old, and she has always been the most other-directed person. My father was very domineering. My mother is now a widow. She phoned me up this year, and she's a football fan, American football. And when the Super Bowl was on, she phoned me. She said, I want to watch the Super Bowl, but I'm on my own. Okay, well, I hear about her being on her own a lot, and we try and help her, but I don't live where she lives. But I do have two brothers who live in the same city, and I said, phone Gary and Tim. Tell her you want them to come and pick you up, and you're going to watch the Super Bowl with them. She said, I couldn't do that. I said, why? She said, those boys are funny. Now, those boys are funny. That's not the issue. The fact is, she couldn't phone on the day of the Super Bowl and invite herself over. So I said, okay, you have two friends who live in your community. You have Betty and Jean. I don't know if they like football, but I do know that they like wine. Yeah, phone them up, buy a box of wine, which is how she drinks it, and get them to come over. You watch the football game, they get they get drunk. But she said, I couldn't do that. I said, why? She said, oh, those girls are funny. You just can't invite them on the day of something. And as you can imagine, she watched the Super Bowl by herself. It's estimated that of the adult populations in Canada, the US, etc., the 10% could be considered self-directed. 90% of people are other-directed to one extent or another. And yet we know that people who are self-directed do far better in retirement than people who are other-directed. We know that people who are single do far better in retirement than people who are other-directed. In fact, there was a New England Journal centenarian study of a few years back, looked at men and women over the age of 100, more women than men, obviously. The researchers found something that was interesting to them. A statistically significant number of women over the age of 100 had never been married. No, that's not where we're going with that. Think about this. If you're over the age of 100 and you've never been married, would you not had to have been self-directed? You couldn't have sat back and waited for life to... You had to go out and get it. And when we find in divorce, in bereavement, if you are on your own, the people who do far better are people who say, it's up to me. If it's to be, it's up to me. I'm going to go make this my life. So, in my uni days, I had a poster on my wall, and it's interesting because this poster seems to be universal. Two vultures sitting at an expansive desert. All right, here's the third one. And this explains a lot about healthy aging. It has to do with, do you create negative stress or positive stress? Now, you're saying stress is stress. No, it's not. Negative stress. We've got these two little almond-shaped things in the back of our head called the amygdala. When you're worried about something, and generally it's self-inflicted, we produce norepinephrine or cortisol. Anybody heard of cortisol? Know what it is? Okay. Cortisol's nasty. The one thing about cortisol is if you keep producing it, because it originally, I suppose, was because of the flight or fight response. And so what it did is it got you prepared. It enlarges your arteries. It enlarges your heart. It increases your blood pressure, puts plaque on the brain, but it undermines your immune system. This is not particularly good. On the positive side, when we are doing something that really makes us happy, we produce serotonin, the happiness drug. Serotonin feeds directly into the brain's pleasure center. It's a neurotransmitter. When we are doing something that makes us feel at peace with the world, when we feel like everything's good, when we're in love, when we look out at the vista and go, that sense of overwhelming peace. You get it from spirituality, from religion. You get it from just enjoying life and feeling at peace. We produce dopamine. Dopamine, human cocaine. And it also goes to the brain's pleasure center. Now, whether retirees realize they're doing it or not, successful retirees do more things in their life to create dopamine and serotonin than they do to create norepinephrine and cortisol. So you take the negative stress out if you can, and you try and do things that make you happy or make you feel at peace. Because it's simply just an equation. Now, it's a little more in depth than that, but the fact is, you want to do things that make you feel happy or at peace. And you think about that. Question?
Okay, so 90% of retirees are miserable.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, only 10% have got that, was it positive or that word?
Self-directed?
Self-directed?
Yeah.
So the self-directed people go, absolutely.
Yep.
I'm going to make myself happy. I'm going to do the things I want to do.
Yep.
Right. So if there's only 10% of them doing that, how did the other 90% get onto this dopamine?
I'm looking to see if you could buy it, but actually you can. It's actually called cocaine, but we're not going there, especially not on my trip to the Philippines. But the fact is that you've got the general condition that we have is we fall brain dead. We just exist. We stop living. And there can be various degrees of being other directed. But the fallback position for most people is they're stressed about their life, they're stressed about everything they can be stressed about, and they don't do a lot of things to make themselves happy because their attitude is such they will never be happy, or they are drama queens, and we've all got those in our lives too. So I have to tell you, and that's why I do these seminars, that the majority of people that I find simply exist in retirement. And the older you get, the more you simply exist. Now, you listen to what I just said, and you're going, bugger that. I am not going to do that. But we all know people who have just retired, and one of them is more self-directed than the other. One of them wants to get up and do things. The other one just wants to sit on the couch. All right, now, part of the problem is hormonal. And I'm going to pick on you again, and I apologize, but you came here. Anybody here heard of the term andropause? Does that ring a bell? All right, andropause is male menopause. Okay, you pay attention to this because it's coming. All right. Did you know that by the time that you are my age, and I don't want to give away, and this is too much information, I know, but you will produce very little, if any, testosterone. Did you know that? Do you have kids yet? Okay, well, yeah. Why are you still here? Now, I don't want to ask, but are you roughly the same age? You guys are married, right? You're engaged. Okay, good. Hurry that one up, too. Now, you know what's going to happen when you're sick? That's a good growth. What I find about Australian men, I can't grow a beard, but everybody in Australia has got a beard. Or got a, Yeah, there you go. Hey, wait, I got stuff. Don't go yet.
I'll go back. I'm just...
Yeah, but this is my best line. Look, prostate issues are not my problem. Did you know that by the time you get to be my age, you will stop shaving and you will start? Did you know that? Welcome to andropause. And here's the relevance of andropause. Men generally, when they're in their 60s or early 70s, have less get up and go unless you can artificially augment that, and you can. But quite often, a woman who is now postmenopausal for quite some time, she wants to get up and go, and the man is sitting there going, you go. I'm just here, I'm watching footy, you go. So generally, you've got to get yourself up and going. Or, yeah, question?
No, sorry.
I thought if you're asking a question, that's awfully gutsy. So there is relevance in that, and that is that even despite our best efforts, what happens is we tend to get drawn into this black hole if we allow ourselves to do it, and we know people who have done that, and that's got to affect health. Certainly it's got to affect health because we view that as being stressful. And we lose the enjoyment out of life because we've got this idea that I'm too old to do anything, that I don't have to try and push myself. And what I'm suggesting from a healthy aging perspective is maybe you should rethink that. Now put all this together, and the question then is, all right, we talked about happiness, we said that maybe it's not money, but if it's not money, what does science tell us that it is? A fellow that I follow, Dr. Martin Seligman, who is kind of the guru of positive psychology. He's from the University of Pennsylvania. He developed what he calls his PERMA formula, P-E-R-M-A. All right, it's an acronym, and I want to share with you what it is. The P in PERMA stands for positive outlook. We've talked a lot about being self-directed, being positive, all right? So that's the P in PERMA. The E stands for engaging activities. We have to do things that make us feel relevant. We talked about that. The R is for relationships. And so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. The R is for relationships. The M is for life meaning. Because if you don't think it's worth getting out of bed, then what's life all about? So we need life meaning to push us forward. Some people get it through religion, through spirituality, through inner peace, but you believe you've got some reason to be here. And then the last one, and this may surprise you, it's achievement. And achievement is part of the human condition. We need achievement. We need to feel like we're doing something. Maslow, who we all learned about in uni, talked about this as ego satisfaction. And we need to feel like we actually have achieved something. But interesting, one person's achievement is not necessarily another's. So let me give you an example. In the fall, when the leaves have fallen, grandfather, grandson are going to rake the yards. Grandson rakes the front yard, grandfather rakes the back. Grandson rakes it all up in a day. Goes to the backyard. Grandson has only raked up half. Grandson says to grandfather, Grandpa, why didn't you rake it all? He said, because if I raked it all, I would have nothing to do tomorrow. His goal was, I'm going to feel good if I rake half the yard. So that's an achievement. Another example is I do some work for the American Bar Association, and I've also done some work for a group of lawyers who get together every year, and they've known each other since law school. So about 3 years ago, one of the members of the group, Marion, who was the #1 trial attorney in the city of Chicago, she fought all the biggest cases. Her name was always in the paper, always on television. Marion retired, and the group in our session said, Marion, how do you handle this? Because you aren't who you used to be, and what's that done to you? And she said, I was really worried about that. But she said, you know what I do now? I volunteer 3 days a week for the Chicago Catholic School Board, and I help them design programs for kids in the inner city. She said, I'm getting more out of that than I ever did practicing trial law. That's her achievement. So as we think about what we're going to do, remember that there are things that you can achieve. They don't have to be big, but we need them every day so we feel good about who we are. I'm a list builder. I like lists. And that's my way of getting through it. I'm currently, and as an achievement, I finished off the list that I started on October the 10th. Tomorrow I'll do October 11th, at least start it. I like lists. My wife likes lists for me. We call them the honey-do list. Anybody familiar with that term? Yeah, right. So we need achievement. So that's the PERMA formula. And if you're thinking about your life and what you want to accomplish, it might make some sense to put the goals that you have in terms of PERMA.